One night, me and some friends decided to go clubbing. I hadn't been out for a while, so I decided to go out. I was living in my own apartment at this point in time, further east, past the CBD. It was still walking distance to the clubs and my work. Maybe an extra 10 minutes walk from where I used to live, in the apartment building with my mate. Anyway, since I was going to be drinking, walking was my only option at the time. By the time I got there, everyone was already there, waiting out front. We decided to go in. We picked a table and sat there for a few minutes before going to the bar to order drinks. The club wasn't too busy, so we made sure we got our table before the club got packed out. After going to the bar, we were sitting there chatting. I looked up and noticed a guy from across the other side of the club. He was looking at me. I looked back at him, and when he realised I made eye contact with him, he got up and walked over to our table. He said hi to everyone while resting his arm on my shoulder. He introduced himself as Chris. Then he turned to me and said, "I know you. You work at Woolies across the road here, hey?" I couldn't help but confirm it. I told him everyone knows I work there. We were all there talking, then all of a sudden Chris starts massaging my neck from behind me, as he was standing kind of behind me the whole time. Yeah, it was kind of weird. I don't even know the guy, but yet he was touching me and flirting with me. It felt nice, and I didn't want to make a scene, so I let him keep doing it. The club was now packed. The music was blasting. Chris asked me if I wanted to dance, so I thought, why not? As we were dancing, he was getting really close to me. It kind of made me feel uncomfortable, but we kept dancing. He then started to wrap himself around me and expected me to do the same back, but I didn't. Now I could see a heap of men at one of the closer tables at the front of the dance floor, pointing at us and mocking us. I was really starting to get overwhelmed, so I'd had enough. I decided to walk off the dance floor, and I headed for the restrooms. I went into a cubicle and closed the door and stayed there for 5 minutes to recompose myself. When I came out, I went to the basins and freshened up, and then in comes Chris. "Hey, I was wondering where you got to. Want me to buy you another drink when we go back out?" I shoved past him and said, "Sorry man, no thanks," and I went back out to the table where we were sitting at before. The club was now going off. It was that packed, you could hardly move. Once I got back to the table, all of my friends had split off, and there were different people sitting at our table now, people I didn't know. So I decided, while Chris was still in the restrooms and my friends were all off seeing other people now, I figured I could sneak away and leave without anyone seeing me. The dynamics had changed in here way too much. It was time for me to go. As I walked out of the club, a few of my friends were out having a smoke, but they didn't see me. This was my perfect escape. Not long after though, I got a text from one of my friends asking me where I went, also making a joke that I was off with Chris somewhere, doing the dirty. But I texted back saying, "Nah, I'm heading home, enjoy your night." On my way home, I stopped at the kebab shop to get something to eat. After having a few drinks, I started getting really hungry, plus it would have done well for the walk. As I kept drawing towards home, I started to forget all about what had happened at the club. I was happy, but I just wanted to get home, shower, and go to bed. Next thing, I hear footsteps coming up from behind me. It sounded like they were running. I turned around to see a guy running in my direction. Please tell me this is not Chris. Sure enough, it was, and he was calling out to me, telling me to wait up. Damn it! I thought I'd lost him. I'm nowhere near the club now. This guy was starting to really freak me out. "Hey, where are you off to?" "I'm heading home." "Why?" "Oh, do you mind if I come with you?" I actually could not believe what I was hearing. I didn't want him to come back to my house. because I didn't want him to know where I lived, even though where we were standing at this point, I was only a block away from home now. Dude, come on. Don't you understand? I'm not at all interested, okay? Chris then looked puzzled, but then he started to look annoyed. Well then, no need to play hard to get. I'm not playing hard to get. Just leave me alone. I then started to walk away, and he just stood there. He didn't move. I don't know how long he stood there for, but it was a while. I decided to walk past my street, so he couldn't see where I actually lived. He didn't follow me though, and I got back to my unit safely. I didn't see Chris again for a little while. Maybe a few weeks had passed. With this next encounter, I was at work. It was mid-morning and it was kind of busy. I was on the express lane checkout and Chris had come in to get a couple of things. I noticed him standing in line. I wanted to excuse myself from the registers to avoid him, but it was starting to get really busy, so I couldn't leave. Although, the checkout manager then came over to me and told me to switch registers. She told me to go down to one of the bigger registers to serve some trolley loads, so I did. And that actually made me feel relieved, because then I didn't have to serve Chris. Even though after he was served at the express checkouts, he came over to the end of my register and tried to talk to me while I was serving and talking to my customer. My customer then looked at Chris and said, "Excuse me, your friend is working. Stop being so rude." Chris then said, "Sorry," and left the store. I apologized to my customer and she told me it wasn't my fault and that he was just being rude. When it got quieter, I went back to the express lanes where my manager asked me about Chris. I told her that he'd been harassing me from the club a few weeks prior. Apparently, Chris asked whoever served him what time I finished work. They told him I finished at 7 p.m. I got really flustered and asked, why? Now he's going to come back at 7 p.m. and harass me again. My manager informed me that they just thought he was a friend of mine. I replied angrily and said, no, far from it. What was I to do about this situation now? My manager then said if any drama happens, just call the duty manager and he'll be banned from the store, and we'll call the police too if things get out of hand. But this didn't make me feel any better, however, but what else could I do now? The end of my shift came. It was 7 p.m. and I'd been dreading this moment ever since earlier that day. It had been a long and exhausting one, so I was really just wanting to go home and relax. This particular day though, I had driven to work because I drove to get lunch during my lunch break. I was still in the store and I hadn't seen Chris anywhere. Maybe he wasn't going to show up after all, but as I was walking out to my car, there was someone leaning up against it, waiting for me. It was Chris. Dude, what are you doing? Like, what do you want? I just want to talk to you, be friends, maybe more. This guy was absolutely delusional and just would not take a hint. Look, I'm tired of this. I'm going home. Leave me alone, dude. I got in my car and started it. Despite him leaning on it, I still drove off, making him stumble. I looked in the rearview mirror and he stood there with his arms in the air. How the hell did he know which car was mine? Maybe he was watching me during my lunch break going to my car. This was getting beyond ridiculous. The next day, I was back at work and I reported the latest encounter with Chris to my manager. She then informed me that if he comes into the store again, he'll be banned and escorted out by management. Sure enough though, Chris walks in and lets me know that he's there because he starts yelling out my name and approaching me. The checkout manager notices this and calls for all available management to the service area over the intercom. 4 different managers emerged from the aisles, and my manager explained the situation to them and that I was being harassed as they spoke. The managers walked over and said to Chris that he had to leave and he was now banned. The look on Chris's face, though, was a shock of horror. He then started to argue with them and say that he didn't do anything wrong and that he had every right to be there, but then the store manager said, "No you don't, no one harasses my staff, come on, let's go." Before anyone had a chance to escort him out, he had to get the final word in. He yells out in front of everyone, "He's just a liar, he can't be trusted, you should watch him, like I do." Hearing this come out of his mouth was very unsettling. He really has been stalking me. The managers escorted him outside of the building, and from there, I couldn't tell you what happened after that. All I know is, I was questioning whether to report Chris to the police or not. I decided to wait and see if he would encounter me again, but after a few weeks and to months had passed, nothing more happened. I never seen Chris again. It's like he just vanished. I'm glad though. I wasn't sure how far he was going to take things or how long he was going to keep playing his games for, but I was glad that they were all over now.